Welcome to my view from the piano bench. This looks like a different view. Well, that's because I have my portable bench today, and I am visiting the home, the music room, the library, the museum of my friend Dave Robinson. And I'll tell you right off the bat, Dave is a really, really good sport. So I'm looking forward to it.
Good sport about what?
But I'm not telling people what we had to go through just to
Okay.
make this setup happen here. So before I introduce Dave, which is probably backward, but I already brought it up, where we are right now, and when I came here for the first time, I just kind of gawked the whole time. This is Dave's CD and record collection all the way around. Dave is a traditional jazz musician, performer, educator, advocate. And I knew that would make a really interesting discussion that hopefully you would appreciate, whether a musician or not, as always with these streams. So thanks for being here. Thank you, Dave, for being here.
Thank you, Joe.
And maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit in that direction, though.
Oh, okay.
As much for
Hi, I'm Dave.
yeah, no, not that your profile isn't stunning, okay, but this way you're projecting toward
Sure, okay. I'm a jazz trumpeter. As Joe said, I sort of specialize in traditional jazz, or trad jazz as we call it, New Orleans style, swing. I lead an adult band, I lead a youth band. I do a radio program. I've done broadcasting on Sirius XM radio, and right now I'm doing a show here locally in Wharton on WKHS. I have done jazz workshops around the country in conjunction with a traditional jazz kit that I've produced. And I'm currently the president of the board for the Mainstay in Rock Hall down the road here, a wonderful venue. And we present all kinds of music there.
Dave, when is it that you moved over into my neighborhood? How many years has it been?
It was January 2019.
2019.
Yeah.
All right. So Dave has been here long enough to start to figure out, but he knew before he moved here that this is a unique and wonderful area.
It is.
The upper mid eastern shore of Maryland, and as much of a rural area it is, there's also a wonderful arts community here. And I remember Chestertown in particular, which is the what do you call it, county seat of Kent County.
Mm-hmm.
Not too many years after I moved here, a friend brought me aside and said, Joe, if you're an artist or an intellectual or a musician or anything like that, you don't have any better home on Delmarva than you do in Kent County and Chestertown, which is true. Now, the entirety of the downtown of Chestertown is an arts and entertainment district. It's designated by the state for tax purposes.
That's right.
And it doesn't hurt that we have a college. We have Washington College.
Yep.
But even apart from that, there's always been this arts culture. And although, as Dave has experienced, but knew before he came, there may not be enough going on because there are more cows than people that live here, really, to like allow a musician to work full time, to just gig entirely locally. There's still a lot happening around here.
Mm-hmm.
And Dave has thrown himself right into it, which we're all grateful for at the Mainstay, of course. But I'm hoping to just get Dave talking about some things, and I think an interesting subject that the two of us can find a lot of common ground on, even though maybe some differences, is the state of jazz today and the distinction between what would now be called traditional or trad jazz. It used to have other names. uh, and just jazz in general. So, how would you describe that fork in the road for you?
Well, I hate to describe it as a fork.
Okay, well,
Because,
change my terminology.
well, just because I like to think of jazz as one music, but it does have distinct stylistic byways. uh, but trad jazz is one of many different approaches to playing jazz. It shares it has certain commonalities with even avant-garde. Avant-garde is very much spontaneous improvisation, and trad jazz is an improvised approach to ensemble playing that follows chord patterns more so than the avant-garde school, but still it's a group of musicians improvising and making a statement together, listening to each other, feeding off of each other. Uh, Jazz. I like to think that jazz didn't evolve so much as it expanded.
Hmm.
We add new layers to the jazz canon, but we shouldn't be throwing away things that happened before and deciding that they're no longer relevant or worth listening to.
That is all. That was a lot of stuff Dave just said. As you say, I was taking notes. The educator in Dave must have been proud of me how much I was writing down. See, so I realized right away when I said fork in the road, and then you redirected or corrected that. I was looking at it from the perspective of playing the music, either this or that, because as a performer, as somebody like looking at what I'm going to play, there is a difference between how you're going to approach playing
Mhm.
tragedy, how you're going to think about it,
Sure.
how it's conceived.
Yeah.
So the fork in the road is when you're traveling toward it,
Mm.
right? When you're traveling from it in terms of the evolution or the expansion, as you say, it's not a fork at all. It's actually the foundation of everything that came after it.
Yes, what we call trad jazz is the foundation of what came after, but it remained, to me, it's not just the foundation of the house, it's a room in the house,
Oh yeah,
and we still live in it. It's not just something that undergirds better things that came later.
I love how you keep intelligently correcting me like this. This is great.
I'm not correct.
No, you should no, because words are important. And I like to think I'm conscious of the words and the meaning that I use.
Mhm.
So I say foundation, and it's like, well, yeah, but more than foundation, because the foundation just has stuff all on top of it. I'm not looking at tread, and neither am I. So in one sense, a foundation, but in the other sense, a place along the way that you can stop, just like you can perform Bach or you can perform Debussy.
Mm-hmm.
And Debussy doesn't erase Bach because Debussy's sitting on top
Exactly.
of Bach.
And in the whole, the whole canon of classical music is not swept under the rug today as being old fashioned. I mean, and that's hundreds of years old now.
Right.
And we still find great meaning in listening to it, and still great. It expresses feelings that we feel today, still hundreds of years later. So in jazz, jazz has had a relatively rapid succession of styles, but I don't even like to use the word succession because that implies that a style comes along and replaces what came before. It adds to what came before,
Yeah.
and it sits alongside what came before, and it becomes another approach to use.
Yes.
And then somebody comes up with something new that gets added to the plate or the
Mhm.
palette, you know, and you've got all these different colors to paint with.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't be discarding the original colors just to paint with the new ones. We don't do that in classical music, so we shouldn't do that in jazz.
And that is the best argument, and one that's out there, and I've heard many times. You know, Joe Mediri is one to promote that. You know, in fact, what he'll do is he'll expand on it, and he'll say that the classical musician is kind of expected to be able to perform Debussy or things more modern, and expected to be able to perform Mozart and Bach and things going back.
Yeah.
And the jazz musician gets pigeonholed into one of them. So it's always incumbent on us as musicians to try to expand ourselves while being whoever it is we are.
Mm-hmm.
But your point about the legitimacy of it all, yes, and I think, comment on this, I think we're in a better position now than we were when, let's say, I was a teenager in the 1970s. So when I was a teenager in the 1970s, my exposure to jazz was entirely trad and swing, right? You know, and that
really that wasn't my experience as a student in the 70s.
Well, that's because I sequestered myself. I found something I loved.
Uh-huh.
You know, I followed my heart and you know, put blinders on myself to everything else.
Okay.
Right. So the first real jazz was Joe Mediri feeding me all these Benny Goodman Trio, the complete collection of the Goodman Trio stuff, and I'm listening to Teddy Wilson. I'm listening to Fats Waller, and I'm just loving it. And we're still in high school, and we formed this Benny Goodman Trio, you know, this thing. We were doing gigs, doing that stuff, and of course this was in the 70s, and fusion had really taken a hold. Every high school jazz band was playing Maynard Ferguson stuff, right? And this hipper than thou attitude was really, really strong in jazz.
Yeah.
I think we've had enough time, and here's my point, and tell me what you think. We've had enough time between the 70s and now, and 50 years, for it to be understood the way that jazz, as you were describing it, as this evolution where all these points along the way are valid. And fortunately, there are influential jazz musicians. Wynton Marsalis is one of them.
Yes.
Who makes that point, and not only makes that point, programs to that point, and advocates for that point.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I think that the tribalism in jazz is less a thing now, but I can tell you, growing up in that tribalism, I still have PTSD from
it. And I agree with you. When I was a student in the 70s, the only thing I was getting exposed to in school was more contemporary stuff. And in fact, the word we don't use anymore, Dixieland, was still in widespread use then, and my college jazz instructor used to say to me, Dixieland isn't jazz, it's just Dixieland, which is ridiculous. So I actually signed up for an honors course and made him my honors instructor, and my topic was the evolution of traditional jazz, although I shy away from that word evolution now, but I did sort of like a radio pilot series, and mainly to introduce him to the wide spectrum of that music, and I got an A from him. And he said, I heard things I've never heard before. That was very interesting.
Well, I'm impressed by that.
I took that as a success, but
yeah.
I think that kind of attitude has gotten much better. I do. I think, and Wynton Marsalis is a big part of that, as you say, because he's out there advocating for. He comes from New Orleans, and he at first, when he was growing up, was poo-pooing, traditional New Orleans jazz. Uh, but then he got turned on to that and started listening deeply to Louis Armstrong and Sidney Bechet and people like that, and found the value in that music, and he plays it, he advocates for it, and it's part of what he does at Jazz at Lincoln Center. And just having that voice has been, I think, a very positive thing for the music. And I think, I mean, look at Preservation Hall, for instance, which, and I'm kind of conflicted about Preservation Hall because they used to be about preserving. Preservation Hall, they used to be about preserving what we call the New Orleans revival style of jazz. And nowadays, the original owner's son is taking that in new directions, and is the band it now sounds much more modern, while still following the basic format of trad jazz, at least some of the time. And they go out on tour, but they've become a big name. They play major festivals, and they share the stage and have shared recording studio with some artists that you would not expect to hear with them, the contemporary artists. So they're pushing the envelope, which and making in some way a traditional jazz format, or at least a traditional jazz name, more hip, if you will, to the average audience out there. They've become quite a name, and they're pushing the boundaries. And I kind of hate to see the original style sort of fall by the wayside, because I feel it's kind of in need of more attention to keep it going. But at the same time, they're bringing new audiences in. So I mean, it all gets mixed together and reshuffled, and so it's not necessarily a fork in the road anymore. It's kind of a blending of what's been put out there for years, and I think the attitude has changed, at least in academia. I think there's a better attitude, more open attitude towards teaching this music, and that's why I produced that trad jazz kit, sent it across the country, because I think that the time is more favorable to getting that deployed in classrooms.
Oh, okay, well that's all great stuff, and you've prompted me to bring up a couple of things. Before I hold this up and trumpet it.
Trumpet, yeah.
Oh yeah, ha 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 ha. Right. As long as I'm not the one trumpeting, actually, that's another story, and I'll never let Dave hear me play trumpet. So a couple of things. So I was actually not aware of the turn that Preservation Hall is taking. I have not paid attention to them, I guess, for long enough that I didn't see that. So I'm surprised to hear it.
Really?
But now I'm intrigued, right? And so when you said they made it more hip, and I don't know the answer to this, so I'm asking you, can that be equated with accessible? Or is it like hip for hip's sake, like the old condescension nonsense?
Oh, man.
Or is it accessibility?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that the original New Orleans, what's called the New Orleans revival style, that was really the sole thing that you heard at Preservation Hall for a couple of decades at least. I wouldn't say that is has any kind of an accessibility problem. People who are completely unfamiliar with New Orleans jazz would fall into Preservation Hall and just love it. I mean, that space has an energy to it, and the audience is right there, much like the mainstay. The audience is right there at the feet of the band, and except that they're literally sitting on the floor or standing. But but there's always been a great connection with the audience in that space. But currently, Preservation Hall has expanded their presentation stylistically, and partly I think that's just a necessity because it's getting harder really to find players even in New Orleans who hew to that original Kid Thomas, Bunk Johnson, George Lewis school of playing New Orleans jazz.
Okay.
Today's players have more of the later mix in them, and it's part of their language. But I think there has also been an intentional veering off into new territory, and a lot of what they do is really not trad jazz at all anymore. But it appeals, and they've been able to just get themselves into some of the top jazz festivals around the world, and their name has become a very recognizable and respected brand.
I guess that has to carry, I guess, a lot of different feelings and maybe mixed emotions with you, depending on
mixed emotions,
what
yeah.
doing. So does that mean, and this is going to just illustrate that I have not paid attention to Preservation Hall in so long. So when you say Preservation Hall, I remember the one time I saw them live, or whatever, tuba, two-beat, banjo. It's the instrumentation changed?
Not well. Okay. That style usually uses string bass rather than tuba. Now, when I didn't see them at the mainstay. That was long before I was here.
Back when I was a teenager, I remember. I'm pretty sure there was a tuba player.
Yes, and that was the owner of Preservation Hall, who often toured with them and played sousaphone.
Okay, and I said tuba, but you're right.
Well, but
sousaphone.
Yeah, essentially the same thing. But that's kind of atypical for the style.
Okay.
The style usually uses string bass, and it's more of a 4-beat style than a 2-beat style.
Okay.
But
I mean, I remember the sousaphone and Sweet Emma. Those are the two.
Oh yeah, Sweet Emma, right? She was something.
Yeah.
I met Sweet Emma. I got her autograph, but it took some doing. Turned out she wasn't so sweet. I came up with this little scrap of paper. I was trying to get autographs from the band, and I did. I got the whole band's autograph. This was when I was in college. It was my first visit to New Orleans in the early 70s. And I approached her and asked for her autograph. And she said, "Well, you want me to sign that little piece of paper? Why don't you go buy one of my albums?" And I said, "Well, I've already got all your albums, but they're at home. And I'm just trying to collect some autographs. If you wouldn't mind, I'd really appreciate it." And she said, "Well, I'm fixing to leave right now." She said, "All right,
Maybe you touched her heart a little bit when you said, "But I have all your albums."
Yes, well, I did. It was true, but they were at home.
True and strategically placed.
Being a college student, I wasn't in a position to buy another one just to get the autographs.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, since you said Sweet Emma turned out to be not so sweet, so there's one anecdotal story of my own that some of you who watch this you've heard me say, but I don't know that I've told you. So, yeah. And then we'll go on to this meat and potatoes thing here.
Okay.
Did I tell you the story of what happened in one of my high school stage band rehearsals when I was playing fourth trumpet?
Okay. Not sure.
Okay, I don't think I did, because it actually completely relates to this. Okay. It mirrors some of what you were saying. So I was reluctant to do this on a public format, but a few months ago I did, because I'm not going to name the guy, but one of my high school band directors is part of my PTSD, and I can give you one instance. So when I was before I was a senior in high school, I played trumpet in the stage band because there was a piano player already there who played piano, and trumpet was my double. I wasn't very good, but I played fourth trumpet in the stage band, so I was Pete Barbuti, right?
Okay.
Who for younger viewers, he had this whole shtick about being a fourth trumpet player,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that he would do. And we were playing the Stan Kenton chart, intermission riff,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the solos in the trumpet section are typically in second trumpet. First trumpet's, you know, the guy who's just carrying
Right.
the top.
Right.
Second trumpet's usually the main solos, but
Yep.
sometimes fourth trumpet gets the solo.
Mm-hmm.
And fourth trumpet had a solo intermission riff, and we're rehearsing it, and I give it my best shot. I'm doing my thing, and I'm going to use a forbidden word, okay, in here, both guys. And we get done.
No,
No, yeah, I want you to listen to this. Look, it's a historical context, so the word's okay in the
Okay. Historical context.
hysterical
Yes.
context.
That's all right.
All right. So we get past the trumpet solo, and then the rehearsal has to stop because the band director is laughing really hard, literally on the floor. All right. The rolling on the floor laughing thing, you know, that's actually a real thing. I witnessed it in response to my solo and intermission riff. And what he found so, in his mind, ridiculous was that I sounded like a Dixieland trumpet player playing a Kenton chart.
Right.
Yeah, and I got berated for that.
Yeah.
But you know, that's the only way I knew how to play. You know, that's what I sounded like, especially on a horn. And this is a whole nother rabbit hole I don't want to go down, but why I could never be a good trumpet player, because like you know my piano playing, it's a two-handed, it's a polyphonic thing. It's like my letting all the steam vents in my brain out at the same time, you know, so that, which is why sometimes speaking is a challenge, because you have to say one word at a time and you have to do one thread. But if you're playing, and you are much more temperamentally suited for this than I am. It's your gift, it's not mine. When you're playing a single note instrument, then you know you are, everything is right there, and everything is always along the side distracting me when I'm playing a single note instrument. So I can never be as creative on a trumpet. In fact, I just really struggle. But
it's surprising because I'm just the opposite. I'm in awe of pianists like you who can get two hands going independently and hear all the chords and the melody line at the same time and bring it all together in a way that makes sense. I took piano lessons as a kid, but I couldn't coordinate the two hands. So I'm a linear guy. I can only think in terms of one note at a time. But I hear the chords in my head, but can't do that.
Let me throw it back at you. I didn't mean to interrupt you. The last thing I want to do, but I wouldn't look at I would look at that simply as a temperament thing and a personal gift thing. It's similarly to the concert we just had at the Mainstay, which you attended, where. With the classical pianist, that
was a great show.
Thank you. The person who is so skilled at pulling the notes off the page versus the person who, you know, has to have his Excedrin bottle with him whenever he opens up and looks at the music, which is actually true. I used to take my aspirin to the piano lessons in college because it gave me a headache. But I can't. So I'm just in awe. Just as in awe of what you can do and your temperament can do, as you might say about me, in that, okay, that lick makes sense to you, you know, that lick is the thing. Me, it's like that lick is, a wet noodle in this soup
Yes.
that I have in front of me.
Right.
And I'm supposed to take the wet noodle out, and it keeps falling out of my hand. So I think it's simply a temperament thing.
Boy, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there are other things as well, but I think the starting point of the linear thinker. I mean, without linear thinkers, this world wouldn't exist, and I would have no structure in which to operate, and I would be so lost. You know, the world needs you, Dave.
Oh man, I don't know about that, but
And
so finish your story with the. Did you finish that?
Actually, I did. It's just
Okay.
just a story that a traditional sounding approach to jazz was not only unhip; it was to be criticized.
Mm.
And I remember that I auditioned. I'll expand on this a little bit. I auditioned for All South Jersey's stage band. And he was one of the judges in the improv thing. And I think I got like the highest mark from everybody, but I knew which one the low mark came from.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't hip, because I wasn't playing jazz according to what jazz is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things for me, and again another rabbit hole, was I carried with me for a long time the idea that because I came up old school, because I came up basically living there, and that's how you learn. You play with people. You listen a lot. You don't. As Joe Madeira would say, I don't want to play anything that I have to work out beforehand with a slide rule. that was one of his lines, right? And but I realized that when I'm hearing all this hip stuff, and at the time, like Bill Evans was. The cutting edge, and I realized that I really didn't understand a lot of that. So I had this inferiority complex for the longest time about I can't even call myself a jazz musician. I don't know what I am, and I wasn't uncomfortable with who I was except in the context of jazz. And a conversation I had, and some of you have heard me say this before, but I don't think I've said it to you. Al Stauffer, who was a wonderful bass player in Philly, he passed away many years ago. Who was so open-minded and open-hearted and would play with anybody. There was a very prominent, very contemporary, almost avant-garde player that he would play with, and the Madeira brothers used them a lot. And he loved them, and he was adjunct at the college when I was there, and so we knew each other. And I saw him in the hall, and I just started like lamenting about like how much I don't understand, and like, I'm not even a jazz player. And he told me to shut up in an interesting way. What he said was, Joe, because he knew me, he knew where I came from. The way that you have learned jazz is you came in at the beginning. You came in the foundations of jazz, and as you learn more and as you evolve, you are building on that thing where anybody who comes in now comes in from the current culture and has to build the foundation underneath of them, and you already have that. So you've taken it to whatever stylistic place, 30s, 40s, whatever. You just keep going because you're doing it the absolute best possible way. And I felt so good after that conversation. I felt validated, and I felt like, okay, I'm going to keep evolving. In 20 years, I'll be Cecil Taylor. Yeah, Which I say that sort of as a joke, but not entirely. And it didn't happen like that. But what did happen was, of course, it did continue to evolve and solidify, not in the same line as jazz evolved, but that was step one in having me start to feel that I was already valid. And then it took a few years, and then I realized, you know what? I don't have to reinvent my wheel. I already have a wheel, and I just work from where I am.
That's actually a Wynton Marsalis line.
Is it?
Yeah, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to learn how to play the wheel we've already invented.
I love that.
And yet, I mean, but just to get back to Wynton for a second, he takes a lot of knocks for being stuck in the past, and he's not. That's ridiculous, because he does everything from New Orleans jazz through hard bop and beyond. And I mean, listen to his House of Tribes album and tell me he's stuck in the past, you know? Oh.
No, but he's willing to be non-tribal, and that.
But the whole notion of trad jazz being the past is something I really reject, and so does he.
Very, 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 very good. All right, let's make a transition here, and let's talk about somebody's temperament who can allow him to develop educational material, write books, right? Give organized, pedagogically consistent, structured lectures teaching traditional jazz, right? Even if I knew the subject as well as Dave, and I don't, he's so very historically knowledgeable. I would never be able to develop a curriculum and explain this in terms of what it is, where it is, and yeah, let's start there.
Okay. Many years ago, I just said, you know what, teachers are losing, students are not getting exposed to early jazz styles anymore. Because they have teachers like mine in college who I quoted, and he also used to say, oh, but you should check out Dixieland. You should check out where we've been in order to better appreciate where we are. You know, just it's totally a precursor to something better. You know, go ahead and see what baby steps we took in the early days, so that you can say, ha ha ha, aren't we glad we're beyond that now? You know, that was his whole attitude. And that was a very prevalent attitude. And years ago, I said, what can we do to break through this? And I decided what was needed was a kit of materials for high school and college music instructors to be able to get their kids turned on to this and teach them how to play the music. And so it became my life's project. I had no idea at the time, but it took me 15 years to produce that kit, and a whole lot of fundraising because the kit it finally got published in December of 2014 under the auspices of the Jazz Education Network. And it was distributed to 10,000 schools across the country. And then I went around the country doing workshops to help schools apply these materials. So this is lesson plans for the teachers. They connect with the national music standards for teaching. It's guidebooks, it's audio tracks, video, master classes, and it's all online. The kit here has a poster in it for the wall and a disc, a CD-ROM disc, those were still in use in 2014. Now they're obsolete, but the disc has all the materials on the disc, but you can also access them online with the password. And so it's everything that a teacher a music teacher needs to get their kids exposed to and get them started appreciating and playing traditional jazz. So yeah, it took me many more years than I bargained for, but I'm pleased that it finally got out there. It was done in partnership with the Smithsonian Institution and the National Endowment for the Arts, with support from the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation, the Ella Fitzgerald Foundation, and several others.
Wow.
And we printed up 10,000 of these, distributed them all across the country, both directly by mail and handing them out at music conventions and music education conventions. and through the each state's Music Educators Association. So 10,000 of them are out there, and it's gotten real good feedback, and I still get requests for it almost every other day in my email.
Wow.
So I'm very happy that it finally got out there and it's being used.
Now, is this something that's obtainable by individual people, or is this like, can this be ordered if somebody wanted to get it for themselves, or is this simply a classroom tool?
It's strictly a classroom tool. It's only for educators.
Okay.
Because of the licensing issues. We can't just give it out to individual players who want it, but
gotcha.
Anybody with a legitimate program of teaching young people music can order one of these, and it's free. We're giving them away. So I don't have the full URL in my head right now. Well, yes, I do. Yes, if you go to jazzednet.org/tradjazzproject, jazzednet.org/tradjazzproject.
Okay.
That has a little spiel about the kit and a link where you can request it.
All right. And
It's only for educators.
one of us needs to remember, and it will probably be you, which is why I'm telling you. Make sure I write that down so that I put it in the description of the video.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay. So, since we're now talking about your endeavors, let's move on to another one. And this CD represents an endeavor that started in the 1980s, did you say?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
The Capitol Focus Jazz Band, which is a real thing. A lot of people know about it. It's a long-standing and an important thing. And why don't you talk about that?
It's a band that was formed in 1988. I've been directing it since its inception. It was formed originally under the auspices of an organization called Federal Focus Incorporated, and it was called the Federal Focus Jazz Band. And then in 2004, we switched our name. It's a long story. It wasn't any difficulties with the federal government or anything, but there was a good reason to switch names, so we switched to Capitol Focus Jazz Band. But it's been in continuous operation since the fall of 1988. The bands have been all over the world, playing at jazz festivals all over the country. And it's by audition. It's based in Washington, D.C. And so I for many years I ran it. You know, I was local and ran it from I lived in Northern Virginia, and so it was local for me. Now I live here on the Eastern Shore, but it's worth it to me to keep that going. So I make the trip.
So this is a traditional jazz youth band.
Yes, it's a mix of high school and college students by audition, and they've played for presidents and jazz festivals all over the world, and they play. It operates like a professional band. In other words, other youth ensembles, the participants have to pay to be in it. This one, they don't pay; they get paid, as if they're a professional band. And I'm able to. They're good enough that I'm able to get them paying gigs, and they get paid for it. They don't get paid adult scale, but they do get compensated for their efforts.
Which I knew because some years ago when Jeff Galante was in the band,
Yeah.
and you guys were at the annual jazz festival in Chestertown.
Yeah.
And actually, maybe the last time you were there, I had a duo gig that I got with Jeff down in Annapolis that night. So we went from there. So I was with Jeff, and Jeff was kind of totaling up what he had earned with his gigs, you know, and that included playing with you guys.
Yeah.
Which is how I learned that the kids got paid, which was great that you could pull that off, and you know, and great for their sense of I'm really doing something with this, and it's less about the number when you were like, especially a high school student. It's less about how much, and it's just that you are.
Yeah. We're trying to model the professional environment. It's a training ground. We're trying to get more young musicians into this music, and prepare, you know, help prepare them for a professional career. They have to prepare material at home. They have to be on time, dress professionally, etc., and get paid for their efforts. And I'm very proud to say that several of my alumni have gone on to specialize in this music in their professional careers, and they're hooked into primarily the trad jazz scene in New York City. I've got several alumni there that are very much hooked into that scene. And,
wow, that must feel good.
Oh yeah, yes it does.
Yeah,
I'm very, very proud of those guys.
Okay, so as an educator and an advocate, these two things weren't enough. Let's keep going. Tell me about your Sirius FM or whatever Sirius. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
You know, Sirius as opposed to comical. I don't know. But tell me about your radio show.
Well, yeah, I've done
Your prior one before this.
Okay, I've done broadcasting on and off since the 70s, starting originally with WPFW FM in Washington, D.C. I was doing programs there the first year of their operation in 1977, I think it was. And then years later, I had the opportunity to do a show broadcast nationally on what was then XM satellite radio, and is now, they merged with Sirius satellite radio, and they're now Sirius XM. But I had a show on Friday nights called The French Quarter, and 3 hours of trad jazz coast to coast every Friday night. Really was very privileged to have that platform. And I did a show or two on WAMU FM in DC, and then moved here and noted that there were a couple of FM stations very close by here, out in the middle of nowhere here on the Eastern Shore.
A lot of birds, though.
And
right out your window.
Yeah. And then an opportunity came up through Philip Dutton. He put me in touch with the station director at WKHS here in Wharton, and they use local broadcasters in the evenings to do a variety of music programs. So they were interested in having me do a trad jazz show on Sunday nights. So I'm doing that now, and I'm really enjoying that.
He's back doing the radio.
It's called Jazz Gumbo. It's 8 to 10 on WKHS.
Right. So
90.5.
we have the most powerful high school radio station in the country.
Yeah, it's located at a high school. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's in Wharton, and they used to call it Wharton/Baltimore because you can get it in Baltimore just as if you were in Baltimore. We're right across the bay from Baltimore. The crow flies like 25 miles. As the car drives, a lot more than that, because you can't drive right over the bay, which Google has still not figured out, as I'm sure you've discovered. Yeah. Now, not Google Maps. Google Maps will not make you drive over the bay, but if you search for businesses, it's just libraries or pizza places or whatever near me.
Oh yeah, it shows you all. Yeah.
It tells you it's 20 miles to get to Dundalk.
Right.
No, it's like 60 miles to get to Dundalk.
Yeah.
So I just find it fascinating that in this time of elevated artificial intelligence, that some parts of it are still stupid. Right, but the point of that is that this station is important. It's important in a lot of ways. And it's important to our cultural life here. It carries the feed of WXPN, which is a public radio station in Philadelphia, for a lot of the time. So you're getting that programming, but then you're also getting the high school kids during the day, getting the exercise their chops, and then you get all this diverse programming, and now Dave has inserted himself in there. And I would recommend, because you can stream it. You can go to the WKHS 90.5, and I forget which is the URL, but you can find it easily. You can listen live online.
Yes.
So you don't have to be local. Listen to Dave's show. I know one person in particular who completely became a fan, and just can't wait to hear the show every week. And when I'm around and not gigging, I put it on too, and it always makes me smile. So
that's great.
I would listen to the Dave's show. All right, so let's keep going with Dave's things. Did we mention that this is his retirement life? What? He's busier now than he ever was. But actually, to do what he was doing before, I can't imagine. So he also has a band that he leads, that he performs in.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Okay. Well, I have an adult group in addition to the student group. I have an adult group called the Conservatory Classic Jazz Band, and that group goes well. I've been a member of that group since it formed in, I guess it was 2003, but I've been leading the group since 2011, and that's an adult group that plays around DC. We have a monthly gig at Normandy Farm Restaurant in Potomac, Maryland, and other gigs around the area. In fact, we just played for the Tidewater Inn for their jazz brunch down in Easton.
On this side of the band.
Yeah, so we occasionally play here. In fact, it was it was in 2018 that band opened the Jazz Festival with a dance at the Garfield Center here in Chestertown.
Oh, I remember that happened. I wasn't there, but I remember that happened. Yeah.
And then my youth band was on the bill for the Jazz Festival at Wilmer Park a couple days later. So I brought my wife up with me, and we just spent the time between the gigs up here in this area, just being tourists.
I bet. I guess what happened.
And guess what happened? Next thing we know, we had no inkling of moving, but we just fell in love with this area, this town. And as you say, there's a vibrant arts scene here. We've got the Mainstay that brings in fabulous entertainers of all stripes, and nature, surrounded by nature preserves and small town atmosphere, and it's just perfect for us. And we had no inkling of moving, but we found ourselves suddenly looking at houses and found the perfect house with room for all of this, and here we are. So Tom McEwen had a lot to do with that, the late founder of the Mainstay, who was instrumental in bringing me up for these gigs here on the Eastern Shore. And so thank you, Tom. Here we are.
Yes. And Tom McEwen, that'll be a segue into, and I had this whole list of things that I wanted to make sure that we talked about that you were currently doing, and I think we're on the last one.
Okay.
All right. But I'm sure there are things I don't know about. Nothing that you do is going to surprise me at this point. But Tom McEwen, the founder of the Mainstay, and those who follow me here, we talk about the Mainstay a lot because I was privileged starting in 2016 to do the unfathomable, unbelievable. I can't pronunciate anything today, and that is have an actual steady recurring gig at the Mainstay. When I was offered Mainstay Mondays with the then director Rory saying to me, "I want to talk to you about a steady gig at the Mainstay," I started cleaning out my ears, and I was like, "Okay, I obviously didn't hear that right." Yeah, and I have been so privileged to be a ongoing regular presenter at this so unique and wonderful and special venue, the best intimate performance space venue anywhere, or if not anywhere, one of the best 3 or 4, and I mean anywhere. And I still get to present there, as you know, now one Friday a month, which is perfect. And when Dave first came to town, I was aware of Dave because of Tom McEwen, because of his appearances at with the Capital Focus at the festival. So I was made aware, I think, by Tom McEwen when Dave moved here, right? And Dave made his presence felt, like immediately, and Dave started showing up at things, and then I don't know if it was the first time I met you. It might be when I was doing a gig associated with one of the events to go on here routinely in Wilmer Park, and you showed up to listen.
That was where we met. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I thought it was, but I was well aware of Dave, already, And then next thing I know, Dave's showing up at the mainstay, and Dave's involved, and Dave's on the board, and next thing I know, actually several next things down the road, because we've had some time here. And it's very fitting, actually. It's a very good thing that Dave is now president of the board of the mainstay. And he brings the sensibility of, and of course I'm going to say the wrong words now because I did that at the beginning and I'm going to get corrected. I can't say preserving, or what can I say? Yeah, but it's holding all of these diverse things on the same plate, putting them out there, and having them all be them, they, those, all be legitimate in their own place, right? Mm-hmm. And they chairs this board that directs the main. Of course, we have a new director. It's just going very well. We're very happy to have Matt Melnick.
Yes.
But I think a lot of what Dave has talked about here in general conceptual terms is reflected in the mainstay, and to whatever extent Dave influences his vision of things at the mainstay in the general sense, because he's not going to advocate we just do one thing. No, we do all of these things, and we grow and we push the envelope out while we present these things as all legitimate things, whether it's traditional jazz or more contemporary jazz or folk music or whatever it is that we do.
Well, I love that about the mainstay, that we present a wide spectrum of music, and we try to serve all segments of the community and give people a taste of something they haven't experienced before. And everybody leaves with a big smile. It's a magic place, as you well know, and we're so pleased to have you continuing in a continuing yet changed role. You've been sort of promoted, I guess.
I do feel like I got a promotion.
Yeah.
I got moved to prime time.
Yeah. First Fridays with Joe Holt. This man's an amazing player, as probably everybody watching this knows, but not only amazing player, but just an amazing ability to meld with all these different musical approaches and be a part of it. I mean, Joe Holt and a ballet dancer, really? But it works beautifully. I watched that. That was before I arrived here, but I watched the video of that show. It was amazing. So we're just so happy that you're still part of the team. Our artistic associate, Joe Holt.
That sounds so legitimate. Wow. I could put letters after my name. That would be AA. No, that's not really an advanced degree. All right, scrap that. I thought it was impressive, but no. So I really appreciate that. Dave has been a great encourager to me, particularly in the time of transition. The pandemic messed everybody up, but not just musicians, messed up venues, and it messed up the mainstay. And we have come out of that now, out of that chaos, in a really, really, really good place. And
well, I have to say, it messed up the mainstay in that it yanked the rug out from under us. But we didn't collapse.
Correct.
We kept going, and I have to give our board and our previous programming director, John Thomas, props for keeping us alive, keeping content out there in front of our audience by pivoting to live streaming, mounting the learning curve, buying the equipment. Um, it was a difficult time, but we weathered it well. I feel we stayed solvent. We got new grants. I was busy writing grant applications for 2 years for the mainstay.
This guy's responsible for a lot of the health of the mainstay right now.
Well, it was the whole board really. And we lost our executive director, and had to fill in all those gaps. So it was a difficult time, but we all stepped up to the plate and made it work. And now we have Matt Mielnick in place, eminently qualified executive director, and he's doing good work for us. And we've got Joe back now on Friday nights, and so and hopefully the virus numbers are dropping, so we're looking for better times ahead.
Yes.
I think we'll have a good year.
I think we will too. And if you don't know, the Mainstay now live streams all of its shows.
That's right.
And all you got to do is go to the Mainstay Live Streams YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Now, Mainstay has 2 YouTube channels, so this is the slight confusion. So the regular Mainstay YouTube channel, the live streams aren't there. It's a separate one initiated when we started live streaming shows that were paid shows during the pandemic. So those archives are not there, but after we began to present live again, we just made these live streams available. Mm-hmm. And so some venues are still charging for live streams, but we're going in the tradition of the venues like Mesro and Smalls up in New York, where the jazz clubs where they live stream all of their shows, and I'm on their list, so I keep getting notifications of who's playing at Mesro and Smalls, and sometimes it's musicians that both Dave and I would really enjoy hearing, because they have a variety within jazz. Mainstay does more than that, but they offer that for free. It's a wonderful service, and the Mainstay does now too. Yeah. So whenever there is a show at the Mainstay, if you can't be there, and we'd like you to come. And in fact, if you come from a distance, this is a beautiful area to come and visit, but beware, sure you might wind up moving
That's
here.
Right. Be careful. the tractor beams are on.
That's right. Because I'm another one of my own version of the story of coming down here for the first time, and then it's like, which me was picking up a music therapy contract at Heron Point. I don't know if I ever told you that.
Yeah.
And I was living in Elkton. Every bridge you drive over on the 2-lane road travel, which is all you're going to get from Elkton down here, it just gets prettier and prettier, and I'm panting by the time I get here.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah, so come and visit us and never leave.
Yeah, right. With regard to the live streams, I should mention there is a donation button. They are free, but we do appreciate and encourage donations to help us meet our bills. We are a nonprofit organization, so please hit that button when you see the show. Thank you.
And we have many people who have helped us along the way.
Yes, we do.
And we're grateful for all of it. And I'm grateful to you for doing this.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. It's been good to have you here in the music room.
It's good to be here. Now, I'm not going to take the phone camera off the stand and walk around the museum here, but just get a sense that this goes all the way around. The posters on the wall. I could get a sleeping bag, come here, about a week's worth of supplies, and I would get through one of the shelves, probably reading the liner notes of the LPs. Oh my goodness!
And anyone who wants to visit the collection here and just hang out and listen to some music, let me know.
Okay. You may have started something here.
Yeah.
No, and I tend to too when people reach out to me about the area. I say, let me know when you come down. I'll be your tour guide. So So now we just both put ourselves out there. Okay, we may regret this, Dave.
Is that the phone ringing?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. I think we've served our purpose here, and also filled our time and probably overfilled it. So thanks for watching. Thanks for doing this, Dave. And
You bet. Thank you, Joe.
we'll see you again.
Appreciate it.